Shalom, shalom, my name is Sophie Lavender, and in this week's video we're going to be talking about masking, what it is, and most importantly, why we shouldn't do it. Let's go. So what is masking and why do we do it? Masking is simply pretending to be something else. And in this case, when we talk about autism and masking, we're talking about how autistic people are made to feel like we have to pretend to not be autistic in order to fit in and in order to avoid rejection from our non-autistic peers. Now I'm going to go into a couple of details into what exactly masking is like for autistic people, and then I'm going to share with you a personal story of when I spent 2 years masking. It was very intense, and I want to share my story and my very, very bad experience with masking as an example as to why we autistic people should be proud to be autistic. We shouldn't feel like we have to pretend to be somebody else to fit in. We should just be our true, authentic autistic selves. So masking in autistic people is when we hide our emotions, when we force facial expressions, we imitate facial expressions, we force ourselves to have eye contact, even though eye contact can be very painful for us. We also try to force ourselves to not go non-verbal, even when our anxiety is really high. And on the note of anxiety, we bottle it up. We hide how we feel, we hide our anxious feelings, and we try to pretend that those aren't there. At least I do. When I've masked in the past, I've always tried to pretend that my anxiety wasn't there, but in doing so I neglected my needs. And also when we talk about hiding how we feel, bottling up our anxiety, hiding our emotions, we also suppress our stims when we mask, our happy stims and our anxious stims. We just try not to stim out of fear of looking weird or strange. Masking is simply pretending to be neurotypical in order to fit in a world designed and built for neurotypicals. And as autistic people, we face a lot of stigma against our stims, against, let's look at fidget cubes, for example. I was always told at school to not stim. I was always told off for stimming. And that kind of developed a subconscious way of thinking in me that said that showing my autism was bad. And I'm sure the same thing has happened to many other people who were autistic and went to mainstream schools where teachers just did not understand. And as I kind of venture into my 20s, I feel that there is still a lot of stigma against us, especially as autistic adults, because a lot of neurotypicals still believe that autism is a children's thing and that we grow out of it. Quick newsflash, no we don't. We grow into autistic adults that subconsciously hate ourselves because of the ways you neurotypicals made us feel. Whether you realised it or not, that is unfortunately the truth. And on that note, I'm going to go into a very personal story of what happened when I tried to mask for as long as possible. But what started the long spell of masking for me was unfortunately when my granddad passed away. I felt like I had to be strong for my family, and subconsciously strong equaled neurotypical, because that's what I was told as a child, not by my mum or my grandparents, but pretty much by everyone else. So that, dealing with another layer of trauma, I then kind of like amped up this subconscious feeling of strong equals neurotypical, and I had to be strong because I had to support my family. Then things got a little bit better for a while. And I say better, I meant it felt better at the time, but looking back, I did the opposite of what I should have done. I basically accepted a role where I was put into a really intense sensory overload environment for several hours during the night time. Really put myself into some situations which caused me to emotionally and physically be very ill. My autistic self tried being a nightclub photographer, and as any autistic person knows, nightclubs are hell. They are not it, chief. But for me, it was not okay. And I continued to put myself in dangerous situations. Because if I'm being honest, I went so deep into my masking that I didn't want to be autistic anymore. All these subconscious things that I'd absorbed growing up, all the negativity about autistic people I absorbed growing up, came out when I started experiencing these traumas. Like, if you were autistic, you couldn't do the nightclub photography because an autistic person wouldn't do that, but you can. And it was almost like fell into a pattern of trying to prove to myself that I could do anything, that I could overcome stuff, and that I didn't even have needs to begin with because I'm fine. I was not fine, obviously. And eventually I was leaving an event at the place I was photographing, and I was cornered on a staircase and harassed, and I just had a moment of clarity. I was still masking, but a moment of clarity managed to creep in and was like, this is not okay, you shouldn't have to put up with this. And I stopped doing that nightclub photography stuff, and I just stick to the other types of photography that I do. I mean, I learned a lot in terms of developing my craft as a photographer. I did learn a lot about low light photography in particular, and about concert photography. But now I just stick to stuff that I can do throughout the day because that is generally a lot safer. But I was still masking, and that was still a problem. And I started doing stand-up comedy, which is brilliant. I have loads of fun doing that. I don't regret starting that one thing whatsoever. But then I started thinking that nobody would want to watch my comedy if they knew I was autistic. So I started hiding my autism when I left the house. I used to tell people straight up, like, I'm autistic, because before I started developing certain traumas, I was like the proudest autistic person ever, and I had no problem telling people I'm autistic, and I was so proud of being autistic. And it's really strange how something can happen and you go the other way. And so I started doing stand-up comedy. It was amazing, it was lots of fun, and I don't regret it. But I started to have these things and these thoughts and these feelings of people don't like autism, so therefore I shouldn't tell people I'm autistic because that will result in less people wanting me to perform and less opportunities for me to perform. And so again, I neglected my needs. I forced myself to be somebody that, quite frankly, I am not. And that led to lowering my boundaries in terms of what I will tolerate. And as a result of these things, some toxic people came into my life. It eventually led to further trauma when, after a year of having these toxic people in my life, I tried to, because lots of good things are happening in my life, like some really, really good things, and I did meet some wonderful people. There are some absolutely wonderful people I met when I started doing stand-up comedy, and I focus on those people now, and I want to focus on those people because they are top-tier people, and I definitely do not regret meeting them. But the minority of people who were toxic did have an impact into an inevitable mental health issue that I ended up going through. But because so many good things happening in my life, I started to feel like maybe I could start to be myself again. Maybe I am past the peak of when these bad things are happening. Maybe I can let the walls down. Maybe I can start being myself. So I set up an event to raise money for my charity, which is a charity I will always support because they are wonderful. And one toxic person tried to sabotage it. Lots of other various traumatic events started happening again, and those new traumatic events piled up on top of the old ones, and they piled on top of the ones they had before that, and it kind of became like a what I call the pyramid of trauma, where it kept on building up. And I eventually reached a point where I just could not take that rubbish anymore off people. I couldn't take things anymore. So I really kind of withdrew. I had the biggest shutdown and meltdown I've ever had in my life. And I am not kidding when I said that after 2 years of masking and hiding my autism, that I went to like an 8-month shutdown burnout period where I did not talk to hardly anybody. I didn't hardly go out, and I took that time to really evaluate my needs, to really learn my boundaries, and just to learn who I am. And it's taken me a long time to be able to start speaking about things and to be able to have a zero tolerance policy for toxicness, bullying, negativity towards autistic people, and to have the confidence to start telling people that I am autistic. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay to be autistic. It's okay to be you. It's okay to be yourself. And if anybody says otherwise, they go in the bin, okay? We don't deal with them anymore, because there are always going to be more people who love you for who you are than there are people who would rather take a dump on you instead. And I'm trying to hold back the language, as you can probably tell. So by masking, we neglect our needs, we ignore our feelings, we suppress and bury our stims, which then suppress and bury ourselves. But on top of that, we also reinforce the ableist ideas that certain neurotypical people have, that autism is bad. And I just want to say that autism is a good thing. It is an amazing thing, and it is a beautiful thing, and there are so many fantastic autistic people who change the world. Like Greta Thunberg, for example. One autistic girl has managed to start a conversation on global warming on a level that no neurotypical people have reached. So be proud of who you are. Be proud of being autistic. You are beautiful, and you are wonderful, and you are everything, and you are enough. You are worth it. And you being here is magic. So I would like to end this video by not promoting myself, because it's not about me, it's about you. And I want you to comment below what your Instagram handles and your Twitter handles are, so that we can build and get to know each other and create bonds within the autistic community, because we need each other. If you would like to subscribe, go ahead. Let's collaborate. Let's continue the journey of spreading autism acceptance. And may the stars bring you joy and the galaxy bring you love. My name is Sophie Lavender, and I am a proud autistic woman. See you next week. Bye.